Tropical Storm Karl stronger in the Gulf on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 13th. Well, we're still in a similar place to where we were yesterday, just with Karl being a bit stronger in the Bay of Campeche / Gulf of Mexico, off the coast of Mexico, and stalling a little bit before it starts to dip southwards towards the coast again. Elsewhere, no storms have developed so far, apart from tropical depression at 21W, which for some reason there wasn't marked. In the Atlantic, though, on day 135 of hurricane season, there's Karl. Quite clearly visible there, winds of around 60 miles per hour, and a 10% chance now that we've marked off the eastern Atlantic there that could develop in the next 5 days. In the eastern Pacific, another 10% is covering that region there off the coast of Mexico, still somewhat to do with what's left of Julia, and that's going to continue moving along the coast west-northwesterly over the next few days. Chances are extremely low though. In the western Pacific, as mentioned there, tropical depression 21W, not looking so great on satellite imagery, but it is there nonetheless, and still high chances for one or two of those other systems. 80% chance in the Philippine Sea, that area just off the Philippines 30%, and in the South China Sea 60% towards Vietnam. And in the Indian Ocean, no areas of interest right now, and what was left of Balita, that is now absolutely disappeared and will not be marked on our graphics. So let's take a look at the latest satellite imagery of the Atlantic right now, and you can see what Karl looks like there. A nice little dome of very deep cloud tops producing high values there on the water vapor imagery, and you can see its influence, its tail extending across the northeast there, reaching through Florida and the southeastern United States. Look at the other side there, this is the Pacific side. You can see one or two little disturbances there off the coast of Mexico, and possibly another one further behind there, and we could see something develop out of this, but still extremely low chances, fighting a lot of dry air there in this region. Eastern Pacific is, in its latter stages of the season, and the Atlantic isn't very far behind, but this is what it's looking like right now. You can see Karl there. It's a nice little shaped storm. It's a fairly small one actually when you look at it there. I actually lost that imagery for a few seconds, but you can see it. We've actually switched to the CONUS view there, the continental United States, which shows the imagery a little bit faster at 5-minute intervals and in better quality. So you can see a close-up there of Karl and those shooting cloud tops. Looks like it might be a little bit sheared on the western side perhaps, but in general Karl is looking okay. It's not far from its peak. National Hurricane Center expect a little bit further intensification up to 65 miles per hour, which is already well beyond what we initially thought that it would strengthen to. I think their original forecast had a 45 mile per hour peak before it sinks southwards again and makes landfall somewhere along the coast of Mexico, either in eastern Veracruz or in the western part of Tabasco. You can also see some cloud cover heading through Florida there, possibly delivering some rainfall and maybe some thunderstorms over there as well, of course affecting those areas that were affected by Ian. And you can see what the western Pacific is looking like right now, and an absolute mess is the answer. Disturbances everywhere, the tropical depression there that you can see with that blowing convection to the east of the Mariana Islands itself not looking that great on the imagery, and a massive shield of convection blowing up over Luzon, delivering lots of rainfall, and that other disturbance that might develop in the South China Sea. A big mess over there right now. Indian Ocean, you can see what it looks like there. Some monsoonal storms over near Sri Lanka, which could end up moving northeastwards and developing into a storm next week. Keep watching. And in the southern hemisphere, across Australia, things looking fairly quiet. Frontal system blowing through, partly to do with Balita actually, moving through the southern part of Australia. And looking further east, there's another front pushing through parts of New Caledonia towards New Zealand, not quite reaching that far south, but headed towards Fiji and Tonga. Sea surface temperatures in the eastern Pacific are still conducive for more developments. We are getting into the later season, as I've alluded to. We'll probably only see 2 or 3 more storms, if that. In the Atlantic, Karl, you can see, is over very warm waters of 28 degrees, possibly 29. That will continue for some time in that area, very warm environment. And in the Caribbean Sea, also extremely warm temperatures. You'll see those warm temperatures receding now, though, across most parts of the United States as the fall temperatures start to bite. In the Indian Ocean, you can see there's still very warm sea surface temperatures touching 30 degrees in quite a few parts of the Bay of Bengal, so if the system does end up there, it will have decent chances of staying strong, if not intensifying. And the Western Pacific also, with large areas there reaching 30 degrees Celsius, where all of those disturbances are. If it was only 1 or 2 disturbances, then possibly one of them would have gotten to be quite a strong typhoon, but with all 4 of them crowding round, it has mess things up a little bit for any real strengthening storms. Looking at the anomalies, you can see the La Nina really pushing on, still very below average there. Eastern Pacific in general is average to below, and in the Western Pacific looking pretty decent, and the Atlantic is still mainly above average, except in the northeastern part of the Gulf and for a little area off the coast of the Carolinas where it's just at average. Oceanic heat content is still through the roof in the Western Caribbean, although it does look like it might be starting to recede just a little bit in the central zone there. And in the Eastern Pacific it is still only small amounts, and in the Western Pacific still very decent amounts there in the whole Philippine Sea. As we know, in the Western Pacific at any time of year almost, you can see a very powerful typhoon in the Philippine Sea. Let's check those computer models then. This is the GFS, and it takes not Ian, goodness me, Karl, mainly southwards there, and eventually makes landfall just on the border between Tabasco and Veracruz. How long's that from now? Probably on day 4 or day 5. Let's just check again. Here it is, the 13th, moving southeastwards onto the 14th, weakening and strengthening a little bit, and then weakening again. A tropical depression landfall there on the 15th actually, so it is only 2 days or maybe 3 days from now, and then it will be completely gone very quickly after it makes landfall. Western Pacific, South China Sea, a very broad system there, tries to get itself together. Tropical storm force winds further towards the east, that other area that we've had an 80% chance for. Development has been delayed on the GFS model, and there it is eventually becoming a typhoon in the Strait of Luzon there, possibly over some of those islands, the Philippine Islands there. So there could be typhoon conditions for some of those areas, the Batanes Islands particularly, looking out for this system, as well as Taiwan, which could get some strong winds, and that whole region will likely get some heavy rainfall. Indian Ocean, looking out to 5 days, GFS is more confident than the other models, but we haven't marked it on our charts because other models aren't in agreement yet. But this is what the GFS is showing up to day 5, with a storm actually forming there on day 4. Day 4 to 5 there, just west of the Andaman Islands. So that could be what happens now, and confidence is starting to build and increase that this system will form at some point in the next 10 days. Watch very closely interests in India and Bangladesh. Looking at the Asian region again here, and you can see there the rain expectations over the next 7 days. Red zones are over 250 millimeters accrued, and the pink zones are over 375 millimeters, and some parts of Taiwan there could get some very high amounts, as well as the northern parts of the Philippines. Over the Batanes Islands there you could see amounts possibly over 500 millimeters, and in the coast of Vietnam as well could be approaching that value as well, 500 millimeters. That's a lot of rainfall to be falling from quite weak storms, as we know. It doesn't look like either of them are going to get beyond category 1 status, particularly the Vietnamese one, which will probably remain only a tropical storm, if that, a disorganized one at that, but broad, and that rainfall will of course cause possibly serious flooding issues. Into the longer range then, this is day 5 through 10. Let's see what the Eastern Pacific whips up, and I should mention it didn't quite make it onto the model runs tonight, but a small chance in the Atlantic of course for a system in that 5-day period. But here's day 5 to 10, and towards the end of that 10-day period a storm does form in the Eastern Pacific according to the GFS model. Takes its time to get there, but it does eventually form as it moves along the coast of the Mexican provinces of Oaxaca and Guerrero as we get towards the 22nd of October. And look at what happens to that typhoon afterwards. It gets caught there and stalls and then just disintegrates as it moves southwards into that big wind system there, that front of sorts, and something else develops out of it in the end, according to the GFS model. By the time we get to the 22nd, that's a long way out. Still a lot of uncertainty about this whole thing. Complex patterns that are in play right now in the Western Pacific, and already we've seen, compared to previous updates on our tropical weather bulletin, that the situation has changed markedly already. Indian Ocean then, this thing has been quite prevalent on the GFS model, but look at this particular run. It's going all out on this system in the Indian Ocean. Strong category 4 there, approaching the coast of Odisha and possibly Andhra Pradesh. A very powerful storm that would be for an Indian landfall, and we're looking at that potential landfall time. Let's have a look. Probably the 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. Well, no, it's still approaching. Oh, there it is. Yeah, late on the 22nd if that was to occur, but it's still very uncertain. Scan the barcode and you can take a look at the Force 13 merch store, where we have all of our products, including individual and full season animations bespoke on request, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirt. That's all the serious stuff done with on our bulletin tonight, so let's check the silly range of models. And you can see day 10 to 16, that storm quickly makes an exit as it moves inland over central Mexico there. That would be a significant landfall, high-end tropical storm, possibly a hurricane. After that, nothing really on the horizon there. So that could be a late season system there for Mexico, and that would be quite a common track that we would see at this time of year, but certainly a potential threat. But once again, that is quite some way out and nothing significant in the Atlantic. Let's look at the next region, the Western Pacific. What happens to that next storm in the South China Sea? Well, that blows up into a typhoon. There's another storm forming there in the Philippine Sea and sauntering southwestwards. Oh, look, there's another typhoon making landfall in Luzon and continues towards the west. Southwest, really. Some very interesting movements that we're seeing on this model run. And late on in that period as well, there's another storm that forms to the east that we just saw at the end of that as well. But certainly the potential is there for some interesting landfalls over the course of the next 2 weeks, mainly for the Philippines and for Vietnam. That Indian cyclone, there it is moving inland after it makes landfall, probably as a category 4 on the GFS latest run, but don't forget that this can change completely by the time we get there. When we're talking about day 10 being the landfall time, there is still a lot of uncertainty, especially when the system itself hasn't even formed yet. Usually the forecast confidence probably increases by about 50% once the actual system has formed and become a tropical storm. Until then, it is a stab in the dark. And what happened on this day? It was 1992 that Typhoon Yvette peaked as a Category 5, a very impressive typhoon that stalled off the coast of the Philippines for a couple of days as a Cat 2, Cat 3 to Cat 4, and then as it accelerated off towards the northeast, really blasted up in intensity and reached probably 175 miles per hour Category 5 status. A rather compact storm as well, as you can see on that imagery. We also had Tropical Storm Zach well out to the east, which in contrast was a pretty poor excuse of a tropical cyclone. Enough said on that one. You can take a look at some images online. Yeah, Zach wasn't great. Meanwhile, in 2022, the next name on the Atlantic naming list is Lisa. In the Eastern Pacific, next up is Roslyn. And in the Central Pacific, we are still waiting for Hone. Looking towards the Western Pacific, we've got a depression, but not a storm name yet. The next name is still Sonka, followed by Nesat. And in the North Indian Ocean, we are looking out for Sitrang as well, as we've seen on those model runs, getting a little bit more likely, but still too far in the distance. And in the Southern Hemisphere, Darian is next up in the Australian region, Chiniso in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and Harley in the South Pacific. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again with another one tomorrow night.